Welcome to This Explainer. Think about how often we just endlessly scroll past thousands of completely meaningless internet comments on any given day. It's mostly just noise, right? But today, we're going to unpack how one single, fleeting comment perfectly captures literally the deepest philosophical threat to our modern society. It's wild how a few random words typed into a comment section can actually unlock a whole framework for understanding human behavior. And honestly, that is exactly the journey we are going on today. So, why on earth should we care about a misquoted biblical idiom? Well, the internet is basically a giant game of telephone, and sometimes those mistakes actually yield way better, more profound frameworks than the original texts themselves. When we trace the origins of these phrases that sound deep and apply them to actual philosophy, they reveal something totally unexpected about how we process truth, how we handle danger, and even how we face our own limitations as a society. Okay, so this whole thing started with a YouTube comment by a user named @bestape. This was on an interview with the philosopher Johnny Thompson. The comment simply read, "Wrestle the lion to lay with the lamb." Now, at first glance, I know it sounds exactly like a direct quote from some ancient sacred text, right? But here's the secret. That exact phrase, it doesn't actually exist anywhere in the Bible. Instead, this commenter unknowingly sparked our entire journey today by mashing up a few incredibly massive ancient concepts. What's really fascinating here is how they accidentally stitched together three totally distinct biblical motifs into this absolutely brilliant metaphor for intellectual growth. First, we've got the sheer physical struggle, which is represented by the act of wrestling. Then we have the massive adversity, the great danger, represented by that fierce lion. And finally, the ultimate goal, the serene peace and tranquility of the lamb. This vivid contrast, between the ferocity of the lion and the gentleness of the lamb, it creates a perfect roadmap for confronting the darkest parts of human ignorance. Now, the specific act of wrestling in this patchwork idiom directly references Genesis 32. This is that famous story where Jacob grapples all night with a mysterious stranger in the dirt. I mean, just imagine the sheer exhaustion of that. Wrestling in the pitch dark, your muscles burning, absolutely desperate for a blessing and for the truth. Keep this gritty, exhausting, all-night struggle in the back of your mind as we go forward, because it is exactly the kind of relentless effort we're going to need to fight the societal threat we're about to face. Section 1. The Anatomy of Stupidity, Wrestling the Lion of Society. All right, so to understand what exactly this fierce beast is that we need to wrestle, we have to turn to one of the most profound thinkers of the 20th century, philosopher and theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Writing from a Nazi prison cell back in 1943, Bonhoeffer made this staggering claim. Sitting there, literally watching his entire society succumb to madness, he argued that stupidity is actually a far greater threat to civilization than outright malice or evil. Now, to be clear, he didn't mean foolishness, like, putting the wrong gas in your car, or a lack of basic cognitive ability. He meant a very specific, systemic breakdown of critical thought. Think about the fundamental difference here. Evil is a visible enemy, right? When a villain does something undeniably evil, the good of the world can unite, point right at it, and fight back. But stupidity? Well, society is actually highly tolerant of it. Stupidity hides comfortably right inside our institutions and within our own conformity. It doesn't look like a monster. It wears a suit, it commutes to work, it looks like perfectly normal people just going along with the crowd. And honestly, that is exactly what makes it so incredibly chilling and so difficult to root out. Section 2. Outsourcing, ignorance, and conformity. The gritty dirt of the struggle. So according to Johnny Thompson's brilliant breakdown of Bonhoeffer's philosophy, we basically have to grapple with three specific elements of this societal stupidity. If we genuinely want to survive the intellectual dirt and grime of this struggle, we have to confront outsourcing, willful ignorance, and tribal conformity. Let's really break these down one by one just so we know exactly how this lion hunts. Okay, element number 1 is outsourcing our critical thinking to third parties. Back in 2014, a philosopher proposed a thought experiment called Google Morals. Basically, imagine an app that pings your phone to tell you if you're being a jerk or what the exact right or wrong choice is in any given situation. Well, today, that's barely a thought experiment anymore. It is our reality. We routinely use algorithms, influencers, and AI to make our ethical and moral choices for us. And when we stop thinking for ourselves and just let a screen dictate our values, we're literally hand-feeding this lion of stupidity. The second element is what the ancient Greeks called amathia, which roughly translates to willful ignorance. Now, this isn't just lacking a piece of random trivia or forgetting a state capital. This is when people actively celebrate the fact that they don't know things, making absolutely zero effort to resolve it. And even worse, it breeds this kind of inverse elitism. We see this all over modern social media, this anti-intellectualism where those who actually do seek out truth and knowledge are just openly mocked. It is profoundly dangerous when a society starts cheering for its own ignorance. And that brings us to the third element, tribal conformity, or what Robert Musil called intelligent stupidity. This is the terrifying reality where incredibly smart, highly capable people use their vast intellect for foolish groupthink ends. As Bonhoeffer witnessed firsthand in the 1940s, it's horrifying to watch a genius bend their own logic just to appease their political or social tribe. When people associate their beliefs so deeply with their tribal identity, they just close off their minds entirely. They will gladly surrender their own intellect just to fit in with the pack. Have you ever tried to argue with someone deeply entrenched in this kind of tribal indoctrination? When you try to use pure logic, or logos, against it, it often feels exactly like that old internet joke about playing chess with a pigeon. You can set up the most brilliant, flawless moves, but the pigeon is just going to knock over the pieces, crap all over the board, and strut around declaring victory anyway. The pigeon doesn't care about the rules of chess, right? Just like the willfully ignorant person doesn't care about your facts. They're playing an entirely different game, one driven completely by emotion and tribal allegiance. Section 3. Wrestling the Lion. How to break the echo chamber. So how do we get out? Thompson outlines 3 highly practical ways to actually escape this echo chamber. On a personal level, we have to apply Karl Popper's theory of falsification. In plain English, that means you should actively try to prove yourself wrong. Seek out information that challenges your most deeply held beliefs. Then, interpersonally, we need to use Socratic warmth. Instead of attacking people with facts, which, let's be real, just triggers their tribal defenses, we should ask gentle, open-ended questions. Give them a safe, warm space to explore the cracks in their own logic. And finally, on an institutional level, we absolutely must welcome dissent. A really perfect historical example of fostering that kind of institutional dissent is the ancient Aztec decision circle. Philosopher Sebastian Purcell points out that Aztec leaders actively invited dissenting voices into their inner circle before making any major choices. Just imagine sitting around a fire, holding immense power, and intentionally bringing in someone whose sole job is to disagree with you. They fundamentally believed that the wise do not think for themselves entirely in isolation. By inviting the friction of disagreement, you actively destroy groupthink before it can even take root. Section 4. The limp of humility. Escaping the echo chamber to lay with the lamb. Okay, let's circle back to our biblical metaphor of Jacob wrestling all night in the dirt. When Jacob finally finished his agonizing struggle, he didn't walk away unscathed. He was struck in the hip and left with a permanent physical limp. And this limp is an incredibly powerful manifestation of a broken ego, because intellectual growth actually hurts. When we truly challenge our own indoctrination and confront our own stupidity, we don't walk away arrogant. We walk forward forever changed, carrying an intellectual limp of humility. It's a lasting mark, a badge of honor really, proving that we survived the fight. And this newly found humility leads us directly to the ancient Greek skeptic's ultimate goal, which is ataraxia. Ataraxia is a profound, unshakable peace of mind and tranquility. Think about how loud, exhausting, and chaotic our modern echo chambers are today. Ataraxia is the exact opposite of that noise. In our patchwork metaphor, achieving this absolute tranquility is exactly what it means to finally lay with the lamb. You've wrestled the roaring lion, you took your hits in the dirt, and now you've earned profound inner peace. So how did those ancient skeptics achieve this incredible, elusive peace? Well, they did it through the unbelievably courageous, ego-breaking act of simply admitting, I don't know. In a modern world that constantly demands we have a loud, immediate, and fully formed opinion on every single political and cultural issue out there, having the bravery to just look someone in the eye and say, you know what, I actually don't know enough about that to have an opinion, is the ultimate victory over stupidity. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this crucial thought. The next time you feel that irresistible pull of the echo chamber, or the urge to just blindly outsource your thinking to the loudest voices in the crowd, I want you to remember the struggle in the dirt. Will you have the courage to wrestle the lion, challenge your own ego, and walk forward with the intellectual limp of humility? Or will you let the beast of willful ignorance win? The choice, and the profound peace of the lamb, is entirely up to you.